feel like we should, I don't know, call this the gray episode or anything. We have the uninspired gray table here, and then like it's the wall. It's pretty monochrome.
Do you want a backdrop? Do you want a CUB proclamation behind you, or what do we have? I don't know.
We don't have much.
I could get some of our silly brochures out and annual reports.
No, we're a little light on decoration in the office, but a lot of stuff going on right now, right?
There you go.
Put that down. Yeah, so I don't know. We've got two cases before the commission right now for the commission to decide on, where they're fully briefed, and one that I know that our general counsel is hard at work writing the brief on. But one of those, I think in particular, we wanted to talk about a little bit about, because we've been kind of scratching our heads about it for a while.
Yeah, we wanted to at least get into the proposal for new natural gas generation up by Wausau, and that would be for Wisconsin Public Service and We Energies.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big project. It's part of what WEC is calling a generation reshaping plan. Mm-hmm. So that's as they prepare to shut down coal. South Oak Creek, at the South Oak Creek plant, they have a series of projects, and so this is one of the first ones that'll come in front of the PSC.
Yeah, so it's so they're proposing this 128 megawatt natural gas plant. I think it's about $147 million if I'm remembering my numbers correctly, and worked on the case. I testified on it. Our regulatory strategist for economics and finance, Steve Keim, he testified on it, and throughout the whole thing, we were just kind of left with the one big takeaway, which is it didn't feel like the utilities did their homework on this one.
Well, it seemed like you have to show any proposal that comes up before the PSC, and that customers are going to have to spend hard-earned money on, has to be justified, has to have the rigorous analysis to justify building it, because once it's approved, we know that how utilities. How our rates go up is through a lot of these capital investments. So every investment has to be looked at on its own accord to make sure there's a value there.
Yeah, and part of it comes down to, I don't know, they're just simply kind of what's everyone's role in the process, right? And the utilities, when they bring forth an application to do something like build this power plant, the burden of proof is with them. Right, to demonstrate to the regulator, to everyone, to the stakeholders, to the public that, try not to bump the mic like that, that it's in the public interest, that this will be a good deal for ratepayers, and this was sort of an interesting beast in that you mentioned the generation reshaping plan. So the utilities went and they did what in our parlance we would call an integrated resource plan. They took this big sort of look at their entire fleet, their entire portfolio, and said, okay, well, if we're going to move towards a decarbonized generation fleet, decarbonized electricity, this is what we need to do to meet the various goals they've set out. And that comes with a lot of retirements. We've talked about retirements in the past, like South Oak Creek and Pleasant Prairie, but it also means for new investment in things like solar, battery electric storage, which we'll get to someday, and as well as this plant to sort of, which the utilities argue is meant to work hand in hand with the solar, to enable a safe and reliable decarbonized electricity future. So they did this big analysis, which sounds very big and impressive, and normally we would be patting them on the back, right, for doing an IRP?
Exactly.
Yeah, but when we actually got to the question before the commission of, okay, we have this facility, which most people have been referring to RICE. It's reciprocating internal combustion engine.
Right.
It's basically a giant natural gas fired like truck engine. It's the size of a cargo container, but it's essentially like the engine you'd find in your car. And when we got to the question of whether or not that specific project before the commission that we were all looking at was the right way to go, there was almost nothing in brought forth that actually supported that. You know.
Yeah, that was a key challenge. Is that what's the customer benefit from this specific project? So many things that were talked about were in the context of this entire plan will save X hundreds of millions of dollars over a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But what is it about this particular piece that can it stand on its own? And that's a question that we continue to have.
Mm-hmm. And so this application was filed, almost a year ago. And the commission staff took the time it needed to review it, deem it complete, and then we kind of moved in through the formal hearing phase that we wrapped up just a little while ago. And throughout that entire time, this was the issue that we had of like, okay, well, where's your analysis of this facility? And actually backing up a little bit, if I think back to the testimony that I put in on the case, the testimony that Steve put in on the case, it's like, okay, well, you did all this work, but you didn't even necessarily do it particularly well. Like there were various technical deficiencies, right? There's kind of why I bring it back to what I mentioned at the top. It's like utility didn't really seem to do their homework well. And then there was an interesting sort of 11th hour revelation where commission staff asked the utilities a question about what would happen if natural gas prices went down or went up, over the next 20 or 30 years. And what would that do, regards to this project? Would it still be cost effective? Would it still be the best deal for the customer? And the answer that the utilities themselves provided with their own models was that if you looked at gas prices being from the range of 50% of the sort of base case, so 50%, and then double, so 100% higher than their base case, even just that narrow range, not going up to super high natural gas prices out in the future. But just even that narrow range, 50% of the time, it didn't even pick the project they proposed. So I don't know where that leaves us.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, we're living in this moment of high natural gas prices, much higher than they were a year ago. People are seeing that on their heating bills. People are seeing that on their energy bills overall. And then as soon as they close the record on this case, there's a war that's actually having a big impact on petroleum prices, including natural gas. Mm-hmm. And the talk is in the industry now is U.S. exports of LNG are going to be surging to help meet the demand that's going away from Nord Stream 2, as that pipeline potentially never gets built now. That's the latest development there. There's a lot of reasons to believe that natural gas prices aren't going to be coming down to some of the optimistic scenarios that were put in here.
Mm-hmm. And that was actually that was all since we put in our briefs and the record was closed. We were already talking about in the case the fact that there were high natural gas prices, right? Because we had Winter Storm Uri last year.
Exactly.
The market has been crazy throughout this year. We've gotten people have been sending us emails and letters saying, hey, my natural gas prices are really, really high this winter. I know you were out in the, talking to the press, trying to, get people ready for that reality. Like,
right.
We actually can't control that. That's set by the global market for natural gas. So we were already talking about high natural gas prices within the context of just sort of the fallout from a storm a year ago. And then now we have war, which, who knows what that'll do. And so, where we ended up on the project was we ultimately had to come down on the side of, recommending to the commission that they not approve this project, mostly because, the evidence, at least that the utility brought forth, their arguments, their information, didn't seem to support this project.
And even if it did support some natural gas at that site, it supports a much smaller version, mm-hmm. potentially, than the one that they proposed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was really interesting. I mean, there was I had never experienced it before. There was what I would call drama. When we got to the hearing, the utilities obviously really, really want this to go forward, and there was everything from technical arguments and people, attorneys pressing witnesses on, various technical elements to what I thought was, I'm not going to lie, completely out of bounds of their attorney being like, well, you small nonprofit CUB, you should have gone out and purchased the license for this product, this modeling product, which the utilities themselves even find often prohibitively expensive to do additional model runs. You should have done that so you could, present your case. But like I mentioned before, it all comes down to the burden of evidence is on the utility, right?
Right. They have to justify it that this is a reasonable expense, and it's really on them to really do that. That's not our role. That's not what CUB's the burden isn't on the consumer nonprofit to do that.
Yeah, and it's not really. It is solely the utility's job, right? If whether it's us, whether it's commission staff, whether it's some other party, points out a technical deficiency in their argument, it's not our job to fix it for them. It's not our job to go out and do the additional homework and find out, what the results should have been, what the results might be for the analysis that they should have done. So yeah, this has been an interesting one. The last several years we've had construction cases. Alliant had 2 big solar proposals across 12 facilities over the last couple of years, and those were a little more straightforward in the sense that I think there's less opposition to new solar, obviously, and the utilities did a better job. Did their homework better in terms of bringing a better case. So the last few years when we've looked at these construction cases, we've done a good hard look, but at the end of the day, we've said, okay, well, this seems reasonable. And I can't actually remember the last time where a construction case came before the commission for generation. We're going to put things like transmission lines in their own special bucket.
Right.
Where, it hasn't been clear, where you have all these questions left unanswered when you get to the end of the very long and painful hearing process.
Yeah, this has been a big difference from the solar. The solar ones were more straightforward. The declining cost of solar has been so dramatic, and the significant declines. And solar is more popular than probably apple pie at this point. So, in terms of generation technologies, so. This case has, environmental groups opposing it as well on environmental grounds. But I think, we were really trying to look at the fundamentals, the fundamental economic argument that they were making, and whether they justified it, and we just couldn't get there.
Yeah, and we tried throughout the case. It's everything from asking them to run their model again with doing the additional analysis that we thought was very important, right? Whether it be looking at a wider range of natural gas prices.
Right.
They are the ones that hold the key to the model. We asked them to do it, and they just refused. They refused that from basically everyone except for commission staff, because commission staff plays a slightly different role and has slightly more leverage because they have sort of the commission behind them. In terms of seeking that information. And we tried to essentially lead the utility to water, to drink, right? Lead the horse to water and say, okay, these are the things you need to present to really flesh out your analysis, to make it complete so the commission can really make a decision. And they fought us tooth and nail on that. And it was I remember even when I wrote my testimony, I'm like, well, if the issue right now is that the utilities haven't made a complete case, right? They didn't do the job right. So we initially recommended, at least in testimony, that the commission go and recommended the utility that they go take the time, do it right, and bring that information back. But I'm looking at the calendar now. There's some statutory deadlines coming up, and I think the clock might run out before alternatives other than just straight up or down are available.
Yeah, we may be looking at straight up or down in the coming weeks.
I mean, but before coming here, you covered the utility industry for a while. Can you remember the last time the commission denied an application like this before the commission?
Let's see. Now you're going to test me. I'm thinking the only one I could think of would be Nelson Dewey, which was the generation new investment coal with an element of biomass, but it was a new coal plant that Alliant proposed, Power and Light, for the Cassville plant, and that was a while ago now, definitely over a decade, because that plant is already the clean energy rapid shift that's been going on. That plant's already shut down. It has been shut down for a few years already. That was the last big one, big generation project that had strong opposition and a commission that said no, that I can think of.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting. We live in interesting times, and like you mentioned, this is part of the generation reshaping plan. We just looked at the agenda for this week. One of the other facilities in that plan is up on the commission's agenda for this week, but the Rice project isn't. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens with that.
Yeah, it's stay tuned. We'll be watching for a decision on that pretty soon.
All right. Well, I don't know. That's. I honestly don't know what to say about this project anymore. I'm interested to see what the commission does.
Yeah, they don't have easy jobs to decide these things, to the decisions they have to make. But I think if they do have to look at the full suite of evidence that was proposed, and they have to, just as CUB is there to advocate for the little guy and gal and the little and small businesses. They have that role to play as to really look out for the customer. So I'm hopeful they'll do the right thing here.
I guess we'll see.